Hello friends, welcome to block 4 May 2021, block of the month, Sew Squad sampler. This is the block we're going to make today. This one I think is really pretty straightforward and fun because we get to do some strip piecing, which is one of my favorite things to do. In the pattern, you'll see that there are two different templates that you'll be using. You'll have the little quarter curve for your corner pieces, and then this nice 6.5 inch square that you'll use for cutting your 4 quadrants out of your stripe panels, okay? So those are the two templates that you'll use. I've backed mine on cardstock to make it a little more sturdy. You'll also need to have a nice ruler for cutting all your strips. I don't show you in this video how to cut the strips. I assume most people know how to do that. Pretty straightforward, just be really accurate with your ruler. I do show you how to piece these panels together, and I demonstrate how to nest the seams because that's one of the big tricks in this block so that you get these really nice finished points. And what else? We cover several different ways of putting these quarter curves on. And so I sort of rehash the previous options that we've used in previous blocks, turned edge applique, and also the fusible raw edge applique. That's what I've done on this one. And then I also show you how to use tin foil to get a really nice folded edge if you're doing the turned edge applique. All right, let me show you really quickly up front just what the zigzags look like. So I've just done a zigzag stitch on the raw edge in a like an orangey color similar to this, and I think it looks decent. So I think I like this. And then after this video, in a separate follow-up post, I'm going to show you a little video on how to piece the curves in if you're up for that kind of a challenge and you want to actually cut out the corner of your 4 blocks and piece the curves in. I show you how to do that. So that's it. This is a fun little skill builder. We've moved away from the half square triangles and flying geese for now, and I hope you enjoy making this block. First things first, I apologize for the state of my fingers. They're not dirty, I just dyed my hair and I always make a mess. But, okay, we're here to talk about making block 4, and we're going to start by making our panels. I love doing striped panels because it is pretty quick to put these together because you can chain piece in pairs. So I'll put 2 strips together, piece them, and then just continue on putting them together into pairs. And then from those panels, we'll be cutting 2 squares out of each panel. So for this panel, we'll cut 2 of these, and then this panel will cut 2 of the opposite, and that makes up our 4 sections. Super straightforward. As you can see, I have my stripes here. I've got these 2, they're paired up. I sliced them up and I ironed them in advance. If you've got any little crinkles or wrinkles in your strips, get rid of those. Just give them an iron. If you want to starch them, you can. You don't have to starch them. If that's not something you normally do. I did not starch mine. So I've got all my strips here, and then you can see over in the corner, I've got these other ones. I'm gonna do a black and white version as well, because of course I've got to always do more than one of these blocks. So let's start by, I'm going to show you how I strip piece these together. Okay, so to start, what I'm doing is I'm following the layout in the instructions. So it starts with the thicker 2¼ inch wide yellow, and then the 1½ inch navy blue. So I'm going to start with those, and then I would be pairing up the 1½ inch yellow and blue, and then a yellow, and then the wide blue. Okay, so if you're using completely different fabrics, just you know, be aware of which fabric is which, fabric 1, 2, 3, 4, and pair them up accordingly. Now, I've got these first 2 ready to go. I don't pin my strips because I've done this a lot. If you feel more comfortable with putting some pins in there, please do. It keeps them from shifting around, but I've done this quite a bit in my lifetime. So I'll just get them under my machine, and I'm going to start sewing at 1/4 of an inch. So as I sew, what I'm doing is I've got this hand here, and it's usually closer to me, but I'm holding these two in place and I'm guiding them with my hand. So I'm not using pins, but I'm holding this hand here, just keeping them, making sure that they're staying aligned. And I can go pretty quickly at doing this. So there's my first set, and then I can just go ahead and pair up the next two. So it's going to be a 1.5 inch yellow and a 1.5 inch navy, and I'll put those two together, and I'm just going to chain piece them to the next one. So I like doing these in pairs and then ironing them in pairs. So I don't have an entire panel that I have to iron all at once. I like doing it step by step. It's a little less tedious. So I'm just going to repeat this process until I have all my pairs together, and then I'll show you how I like to iron them, and then we'll come back and start putting those pairs together into a full panel. Once we have our pairs together, you may notice that they look almost a little bit curved, right? And we want to straighten those out. We want to correct that. So we just do that by setting the seam. So I've got my iron on hot. It's not on steam. Steam is off. And I just hold this end and I straighten it up, and I just give it a first pressing like this. Okay, and then we're pressing towards, this is fabric 2 and this is fabric 5 for me, so we're pressing it towards fabric 5. So I like to give it a finger press. So this also ensures you're getting right into your seam allowance here. You're not letting any extra fabric stay folded, and that will help ensure accuracy in the size of your strips once they're all pieced together, the width of them. So you just give it a nice quick finger press, open it right up, and then you'll run your iron along that set again, okay? So this should really help keep your strips nice and accurate. And again, I'm not using steam. You can use steam if you really want to. I like to just keep that to the end once I've got my block complete. I find that sometimes steam can distort things, so I don't usually turn it on. All right, so I've got those two, and then I'll just continue on with these other ones. Again, doing the same thing, straightening this out, giving it a little press, and then repeating the process. And then once we get all of these ironed, we'll go back to the machine and piece them into pairs. So then we'll have 2 halves, put those into, iron those again, come back to the machine and get the 2 halves together, and you'll have an entire panel. Okay, so it's just a really repetitive process of sewing, ironing, sewing some more, ironing some more, until you've got a complete panel. All right. So that's pretty straightforward, I think. If you have questions about this part of the process, then just drop it in the comments. And I'm not going to show you the rest of putting the panel together, but I'll show you the panel in its completed form, okay? Right, so I've got my 2 panels all finished, and they're all ironed up nice and flat, and my seams are going in the direction that was in the instructions. And now I am ready to use my template and cut out the squares. So I'm going to use this one because it's a little bit brighter and easier to see. And I have my template here. And as you can see, it's got this diagonal line here. This is a line that's going to be lined up with the center seam of the panel. So, and I need to get 2 of these squares out of 1 panel. So what I've done is I've taken the paper pattern and I cut it out, and then I backed it onto cardstock, which is a little bit heavier. And then that way I can take it, and what I'd like to do, I like to just trace the shape so that I'm not just going in right away and cutting it out without making sure it's accurate. I like to have a line to follow instead of cutting along the paper. So I'm going to use my ruler. You can, if you're feeling confident, you can just go ahead and use your rotary and cut these two out, making sure you've got enough space for two. But I'm going to mark it, and then I'll follow the marks, and I'll cut it with my rotary. So I'll have to make sure this line on the template is lined up with the seam, the center seam in my panel. And I've got just this chalk marker here. I love this little chalk marker. I've used it for years. You can get little chalk refills. It's loose chalk, and it's got a little rotary on the end, and the rotary just leaves a trail of chalk all the way around. So I've got one side marked. I'll mark the other side. You could also, if you wanted to, you don't have to use your ruler. I do have this on cardstock, so I shouldn't actually need the ruler, but if you're just using regular flimsy paper, you may want to use the ruler. So let's see, whoops. See, you can see the marking there. So there's the first half, and then I'll come along and I'll line that back up again. And then, yeah, see, I should be able to just move this right along. That looks pretty good. I can see well enough that I know where I need to slice into that shape. So I've got this one cut. So I'm gonna cut this out. You can use scissors or a rotary. I'm going to use a rotary cutter, and I'm gonna make sure that I don't cut too far. I just wanna cut just beyond the line, just beyond that point a little bit. I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna slice up here, and I've gone just past where I need to be, but I'm not gonna slice all the way because that'll cut into the other section that I need for my other square. I'm gonna take this, I'll set this down here along the other line, like so, making sure it's all lined up. Like that. Okay, I can set this out of the way to do my other two sides. All right. Where's my point? There it is. There's my line. So what I'm doing here is just making sure that my ruler is lying right across that, right along that chalk line that I made, but then also that this line on my ruler is straight along this side, just to make sure it stays as a proper square. There's a little bit of extra. Ooh, it looks cool. Look how cute that is, just like that. And then right here. And this should measure 6.5 inches. And it does. So that's good. Whew. So far, so good, okay? So we're going to repeat the process again, cut a second square out of this panel, and then cut 2 squares out of the opposite panel, and then we'll get to piecing them all together. I have my 4 squares all cut out from my panels, and now I'm ready to sew these together. So if you follow the instructions for pressing, you'll notice when you look on the opposite side here that the seam allowances are going in the opposite direction, which means when you sew these two together and these two together, you should be able to nest your seams, and then the same thing will happen when you put these two halves together. So let's just go over again really quickly what nesting seams means. It means that I'm going to sew this one to this one here. You can see that on this side, these seams are pointing outward away from the blue. And then on this side, they're pointing in towards the dark blue, which means they're going in opposite directions, which means when you put them together, you should be able to nest them and bump them up. So this green should bump up against this navy. Just, you'll feel the seams just bumping up together, not overlapping, but just bumping, nesting, okay? So this is where you will want to use pins, because then you can pin each section here at each seam, and that will really allow for some accurate piecing, okay? So I like to pin where I sew, but in this case, maybe I would pin in this direction, okay? And you can feel if those seams are overlapping and not just nesting against one another, you'll feel it, it'll be bulkier. So this way, just fiddle with them until they're nesting right against each other, and then pin them in place. And then when you sew, you shouldn't have any issues, all right? So here you can see I've added my pins. I've put one at every single seam, and that'll keep everything from shifting around. And then I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch seam allowance here, put that pair together, put this pair together, doing the same thing, and then I'll iron those, and then I'll put the 2 halves together. Again, I'll be able to nest the seams, okay? So when you get this half together, and then this half together, again, you can maximize your seam nesting by, maybe I'll iron the seam towards the dark green on this side, and same, I'll iron it in the opposite direction on this side. So we'll go over that. Let me do these 2 halves together, and I'll come back and I'll show you what they look like and how we'll get the 2 halves together, like that. I have my 2 halves together now, and you can see because I nested those seams, I got this really nice, perfect point, perfect lineup of my seams between the blocks. So they really have a really nice continuous effect. And so I've ironed the seam on this one towards this green, and then done the same on this one, so it's going this way. So I'll be able to nest the center seams as well, and hopefully everything lines up in this direction. So once again, I'll be able to nest the seams and pin, pin, pin. This is the point where pins are your friends, and you should put a pin in at every seam that's there, just to keep everything from slipping. Often I'll kind of feel around and make sure that they're not overlapping. It's also really awkward for me to pin in this direction, because I usually pin like this, like that, but I feel like this is the best option here. So when you get to the center, I do an eyeball check on all of these, right? So when I get to the center, I just fold this back. Is this folding, bumping up against this one? Is it nesting up against the other seam? I can see it, I can feel it. I can feel that it's not too bumpy. I might put it right down the center seam, and then come along and finish pinning, and then we're gonna put these 2 halves together. So here's the other thing. The way we add on the curves onto the corners, we're once again doing applique. So you can use any of the methods you've already learned to attach those. I am going to show you a new way of ironing a folded edge around for a finished edge curve. So I'm going to show you how to do that using some tin foil, thanks to Diane, who showed us, a group of us, in one of the Google Hangout sessions. So it's a cool trick. I'm going to show you how to do that. But a few people also asked if I could show how to piece the curves into these squares. So I will do that as a bonus separate video. One of the things I would recommend is, if you decide that you're going to piece these curves, I would probably do it when you're at this stage, when you've got this 4 separate squares. I would piece the curves in at that point and then put them together. It just makes it a little more manageable in your machine. But if you're just going the usual applique route, you can wait until these are all put together and then you can add your curves on at the end, okay? So I'm just gonna go and iron this up and then we'll have a look at, we'll do a reveal and see how the center looks. So there it is, there's the block. Well, except for the curve part, I've got my little template. I'm ready to add on the curves now, but this was the most tedious part, and it really wasn't tedious at all. It's not too bad. I really do love making striped panels. The big thing is when you cut them out, measure, 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 and then cut, because you don't want to go through the process of putting together a nice panel and then cutting the wrong size or the wrong way. You can see here too, I finished it by ironing the seams in like a pinwheel. So I've opened up the center seam to flatten that out. And I've just ironed the seams all going in one direction. So it's nice and flat, it's not too bulky. And now I'm ready to add on my corner quarter curves. So I will show you the new technique for how to do a folded seam using tin foil, and then in a separate video I will show you how to piece the curves in, okay, if that's something you really want to try doing. The challenge is there's a lot of seams here and a lot of give, so that's a bit of a challenge in piecing, but it'll be fun. All right, here we go. Let's just do a quick recap of how to use fusible applique. So this will be raw edge. So I've taken my fusible and I've drawn my shape onto the fusible. So I used my template. The template does not have any seam allowance on any side because there aren't any seam allowances required. This is going to fit right into this corner, right? So I've traced it on the fusible. I've cut it out roughly. I will peel one side of the fusible off this paper, and it should leave me with the sticky bit. The sticky bit is going to go down onto my fabric. I'll give it some heat for a few seconds, and then it'll be ready to trim and peel and adhere to this block, right? And that's all you need to do for this version. So this is the raw edge. This is like the quickest method there is to doing these. We did the same thing for the circles. At least I did that for the circles. I think I hand appliqued one circle with a turned edge. But I don't mind this. I just did a little zigzag stitch around my circles for my other blocks. And I picked like a red thread that was similar to this red, and it looks good. It just kind of blends right in. Okay, so that's it. That's it for this one. You just take this. I peel the other side of my fusible off. It should leave the fusible web on the fabric, and then I would stick it down and iron it in place. I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to commit to this just yet, because maybe I've decided I want to do a turned edge. So here's this new method, it's new to me method that Diana showed a bunch of us the other day on Zoom when we had our little exclusive hangout. All right, I've got a scrap of fabric here. And I have my template, and I backed my template onto a cardstock, so it's a bit stiffer, but you can also use freezer paper for this. So you could use a freezer paper template and stick it down with freezer paper, which is just temporary. Remember, you just use your iron and the freezer paper sticks temporarily to your fabric. I'm going to use glue, just enough to hold it in place, because... Can I get it into the corner there? Yeah, pretty close. Okay, so for this one, I do want to cut out a seam allowance because I want to turn that edge and have a finished edge on my curve. So I'm just going to eyeball about 1/4 inch. I'm just peering over my camera to do this. Okay. And then normally what I've done in past videos, I've taken my iron and then I've folded over with my bare fingers and I've taken my iron and ironed it, which is fine and it works. But this is a fun method where you use a piece of tin foil, and then that way you can avoid burning your fingers. So I don't need to do any turning of edges here because again, there's no seam allowance required for the corner, just a seam allowance here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to start bending. I'll bend from here. Bending over, I'm catching the fabric, and I'm folding it over that edge of my cardstock all the way around. I'm going to go all the way around on here. This is the first time I've done this on camera. I didn't even try before filming. So we'll see. We'll see what the results are like for a first timer, okay? All right, so it's nice and butted right up against the edge of my template. And now I'm going to take my ruler, my iron, and I'm going to iron it up. My fingers are out of the way. I'm not burning the tips of my fingers, which is a nice bonus. Okay, let's see if that's enough ironing. I'm going to open this up, unfold it, take it out. That looks really nice. Look at that. Now I've got this really nice, clean, folded edge. And because I just used this glue stick is great for like English paper piecing and temporary holds like this. I can just pop this right off. Just see how it just peels away. Doesn't leave any residue on the back. And now it's ready for me to pin into place. So I would just put it here and pin it in place. Or you could even, if you want, again, use a little bit of glue again, glue that down temporarily, and then hand stitch or machine stitch it into place. And look at it, it's a really nice, smooth curve. So that's a technique, I guess, originally, there's a quilter called Sarah Fielke. I hope I'm saying Fielke right. She's one of the first quilters that I ever followed myself, her blog, and she teaches this method. And so that's really cool. This is not something I came up with. This is from some other amazing quilter, and I'm just passing the knowledge on to you because whatever tips and tricks we can use for success for these blocks, I'm going to try it. All right, so that's it for our curves. Once we get those on, the block will be done. It's easy, right? This one's pretty good. I like it.